Hello everyone, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about lighting your macro photography. We're going to talk about natural lighting, constant lighting, and flash, and we're going to do some water droplet photography to compare the three. Stay tuned. But what I'm doing right now is I've got a wide, shallow bowl. It's actually a wok that I'm using, but this is going to allow me to have a large surface of water without a deep recess to shoot into, which makes this a lot easier. I'm using a tube, just kind of like how when you were a kid, you had to suck up some liquid soda or whatever, and then you can release it with your finger. So that's what I'm doing to create my water droplets. I've pre-focused on the area that I want, and I'm just going to do a few until I find an image that I'm happy with. We're going to do all three of them at f8 and a 200th of a second, and we're going to adjust the ISO as needed. I'm using ISO 1600, which is much higher than I would normally want to use, but of course this is naturally lit. So hopefully, as you can see, the natural lighting wasn't giving us a fast enough shutter speed to be able to freeze the water droplets. And the reason I chose to do water droplets for this is, first off, most people enjoy water droplet photos, so it's something that you're likely to do with macro photography. But the other reason is because I'm a believer that whatever your system that you're going to build for yourself should be the same most of the time, regardless of whatever you're doing. Let's bring in the constant lighting. We're going to leave the ISO at 800, and we're going to see how far we can raise our shutter speed to try to freeze that motion. I don't want to drop it in there. So give me a second. Let me make a little stand for it. I'll tell you, these little stands are incredibly useful. You need to get yourself some of these little things. This is just like a little $4, Walmart special little light stand that they sell over with the photography stuff, or at least they used to. I don't know if they still have this one, but I mean, these little things are absolute lifesavers. So now we've added more light to our subject. So we're at 200, f8 and ISO 800. We're going to go to 1/320th of a second. I know that's not a whole lot of gain, but it looks like that's the best we can hope for out of this. It is making for what appears to be a more pleasing image, but we're not getting significant gains in shutter speed. So I would not expect this to make a huge difference in the type of image that we're able to create. So we're getting better, but again, it's not right. So let's bring in our flash. So if you watch me for a while, you're going to learn that I'm a huge fan of cross lighting. I very, very much like to have one light in each direction cutting across my subject while I'm doing macro photography. So we're going to set one light down here. This is group A, channel 1. And we're going to set another light over here. We're going to set them both to a 32nd of full power. And we're going to drop our ISO down to 100. And let's just take a test shot and see what it looks like. They did not trigger. Why did they not trigger? Oh, we're not all the way seated. There we go. So now, yep, they're going to trigger. Okay, so test shot. That looks nice. It's still a touch bright, so let's actually go down to a 64th of a second. We're still at f8 and a 200th of a second now. And now we're getting much more pleasant water droplets, as I'm sure you'll be able to see as well. And I think we've just found my favorite of the set. Now, in the interest of fairness, there are a lot of situations where constant lighting is a better choice. for example, with videography, I'm using exclusively constant lighting, obviously because flash is not a viable solution. But there's also, with macro photography, I feel like the depth of field is so shallow, and I also feel like the movement is over such a long, over such a large area on such a small sensor. Because when you're magnifying, you've got to think that something this big is covering your entire sensor. So whereas a small amount of movement normally is obscured in pixel density and you won't see it, with macro photography, that's not really the case. So I believe that it's more important for you to have the fastest shutter speed that you can possibly have and have the deepest depth of field that you can possibly have in most cases. And for me, that means that you naturally should be looking at flash photography. Now, flash photography really scares a lot of people. There's a lot of people that don't want to get into flash photography because they feel like it's complex, it's difficult, but it doesn't have to be. For example, the system that I use most of the time is a cheap little Yongnuo system. Yongnuo is a great company, by the way. If you don't have any of their equipment, if you haven't used any of their stuff, you should definitely check them out. But the system that I use is a 2.4 gigahertz wireless system. So it's kind of like it works the same way sort of like a radio control system does for like an RC car or something to that effect. But basically what it is you've got the flash unit and you've got the controller, and the controller goes on top of your camera, and you can adjust the flash unit from the controller. So what you're going to do is you're going to find the exposure that gives you the background that you like. So you're going to put your camera in manual, and if that's something you're not familiar with, don't worry, you're whatever, your flower's not going anywhere. So you can play around and find the exposure that you want, but you want to darken your backgrounds. Either if you want a black background, you want to darken it completely so it's gone, or if you want a little bit of your background to show up, you want to, whatever exposure will give you a clean background in manual. Then you're going to put your controller on the camera, and you're going to start with your flashes at their lowest setting. So you're going to start at 1/28th, and you're going to take a shot. And you're going to see how it looks. And if it doesn't look good, if it looks like the flash is too dim, you can brighten it by increasing the flash power. If the flash looks too strong, you can darken it by moving the flash further away. And then you can get into using modifiers and things with your strobes, but you don't have to do that. For somebody just starting out, you can get this system with 2 flashes and a trigger. I think is like $150, if even. It's cheaper than a first party flash. Now that brings me to another option that you could do. I'm not a huge fan of this system. I have used it in the past. There are situations where it is the right answer, but you can get, for most manufacturers, you can get a cable like this that attaches to your first party flash. Just like that. And then this other section mounts on top of your camera. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to use your first party flash, your Nikon or Canon or Sony or whatever brand flash, as if it was on top of the camera, but you can actually mount the flash anywhere you want to now. So it'll still work, do its standard through the lens, automatic calculation, whatever your system it calls it, but it'll still allow it to do that. The reason I don't like this system is not that there's anything inherently wrong with the idea, but I find that it's not as reliable because it's expecting the flash to be on top of the camera. And since it's not on top of the camera, the adjustments that it makes aren't always consistent with what it needs to make for wherever it's currently located. For example, if you're doing like what I like to do where you're side lighting, what'll happen is the flash thinks it's directly in front. So the center of your subject will brighten up significantly slower than the amount of additional power that the flashes are putting in from the sides. So what you're going to end up with is a flash that's significantly overpowering itself each time it increases its output because it thinks that it's not making a difference. So my recommendation is get the Yongnuo system. Again, constant lighting like these are awesome for most things. You can use them for macro photography, but in my experience, I don't. I would go for the for the speed lights. And again, I would buy Yongnuo. That's what I have bought. The Nikon system is fine. They do have a CLS system, a creative lighting system, which is an infrared triggered wireless system, which works good in most situations, but I also found it's not really as reliable as the radio system is. So I would definitely go for the Yongnuo radio system. I'm gonna have to hurry this up because I think I'm gonna lose my opportunity. It's supposed to downpour in like 20 minutes. So I want to get this video done and up so you guys have something. But yeah, if I don't get it done today, it's going to be at least a week. So, and hopefully this showed you the differences. You can do the same types of images most of the time with any of the three options, but generally the speed lights are going to be better. And that's just all there is to it. You're going to have a faster shutter speed. You're going to have a lower ISO. You're going to have better freezing of motion. And the other thing to consider is that with speed lights, it doesn't really matter what your shutter speed is, because like my shutter speed in this situation was set to a 200th of a second, but the flash duration of these flashes is like 1/2000th of a second. So even though the shutter speed is a 200th, the flash is creating the effect of a 2000th of a second, and that's why it's freezing the motion. And that's a hugely powerful tool. I mean, if you want to take a photograph of something in flight, like a honeybee, or if you want to photograph like a hummingbird or something like that, if you're trying to do that with constant lighting, it's going to be almost impossible to freeze that subject. Whereas with flash, you can easily do that. You know, almost every image that you will have seen of a hummingbird is going to have been flash lit. So I would highly recommend that you play with flash photography. The pop-up flash on most cameras, like the D850 doesn't have one, but the pop-up flash on most cameras is an okay place to start, but the lighting is going to be flat because it's directional. I would make a recommendation, if you're going to use your pop-up flash, take a piece of computer paper and cut it to about twice the width of the pop-up flash and about 4 times the length, and tape it to the top of the camera and then over the back of the flash, and that'll create a diffusing panel that'll give you at least better light. It won't be quite as harsh and directional as a normal pop-up flash light usually is. And so that's something you can do at the house for free. You can try that and play with it. And you can do the same thing with these speed lights. You can take a sheet of computer paper and lay it over them, and you can make your own sort of impromptu modifiers. And I do that a lot. But anyway, I hope this video was helpful. I hope you learned something from that comparison. Remember, there are lots of things once you get into flash photography that you can do. You can play around with colored gels to change the color of your lighting, and they do make constant lights that are RGB, so you can change the color of those as well. So none of this stuff is proprietary to one type of lighting or the other. It's just you have more control with flash. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.